Today I'm going to show you how to make clay coils. Clay coils are thin, long rods of clay. They can be used to make the walls of a vessel or a tube or a pot, and they can also be made into a variety of decorative elements, including twists, lines, swirls, dashes, text, braids, florals, knots, and weaves, and probably many others. Now that we have defined what clay coils are and a variety of decorative elements that can be used are made out of them, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you how to actually roll out a clay coil. What I'm doing now is I am loosening up this Sculpey, which is a plastic polymer clay substitute, which is what I currently have. The same process would be used with clay to actually roll out your clay coil. But I think Sculpey will work well here as a substitute because it acts in much the same way, and it's going to pop on this black background in a way that's nice. So what I'm doing now is I'm wedging the clay. I'm warming the Sculpey up to loosen up the material, warm it up, make it all move well, because that's what we're going to do. So now we have a sort of a ball. We'll roll the ball out with one hand based on the amount I have currently until we got a ball. Then I might roll it between my hands to form kind of like a log-like shape. And then once it gets a little big for my two hands, you can see it's getting a little long now, then I'll put it on the surface, and then I'll press evenly with one hand, start my fingers together, pushing my fingers out to widen it, in and then out. I'm avoiding pressing too hard with one finger, because if I do that, you can see then I'll have an uneven coil where I have that thin spot and thick spot. That's what we want to avoid happening. You can work that out if that happens by moving the clay around with both hands, sort of shifting the Sculpey or the clay until you get it back even again. You can see it's now even again. It's a little thicker and thinner on one spot because of that mistake earlier, but that's not the end of the world. You can see I'm rolling it out thinner. I'm starting in the middle and I'm pushing the clay out in sort of thin, even strokes by applying even pressure until you then end up with a long, thin rod. Depending on the application, you might go a thicker rod or a thinner rod. Thinner rod, thicker coil, depending on whether or not you want the walls of your pinch pot that you're making, or depending on whether or not you want the lines you're trying to create or the weaves you're trying to create. You can make your coil thicker or thinner. In this instance, I think this is a good demonstration of sort of what we're looking for here. Now that we know the basics of how to form a clay coil, I'm going to form another one, and then I'm going to show you 4 decorative elements that you can use, from the sort of more basic to the more intricate. We're going to start with dashes, which are just short clay coils attached to the side of your vessel, to knots, to swirls, and then weaves. So starting with dashes, this is super basic. We're just going to roll out a clay coil. Once again, pressing evenly with both hands, pressing in and then out, in and then out to lengthen our coil, creating a uniform strand or noodle. And you could also do an ununiform one depending on, like I said, the application you want. So in this instance, I have one long coil here and I cut one over there. That one to make dashes, what I would do is we would cut it into shorter little pieces, and then I would score it, incising this little piece of coil, apply some slip, and then attach it to my vessel. We're going to pretend that this surface is the vessel of my pot, my sculpture, my slab of clay. And I would place it on there, maybe in little dash lines, shorter ones and longer ones, to create sort of a geometric pattern. A project that I've thought about that I thought would be interesting, because I'm interested in codes, would be to make intentionally sized and positioned dots and dashes. So you can see a couple of dashes and then a couple of dots, which were formed out of our clay coils. And then you could make essentially Morse code, and you'd have a little code hidden on the side of your pot that maybe said something, that talked about something that you wanted people that know Morse code to be able to interpret, or Braille, or things like that. I really think things like that are interesting, where there's sort of meaning hidden in plain sight for those people that know how to interpret it. So that would be dashes and dots. That's our first coil element. Another one might be knots. Once again, knots. And with this, you're going to take the clay coil and you're going to twist it over itself. In this instance, I'm just making a square knot, but you could also use it to make like really more intricate, like Celtic knots, or you could do fisherman knots, or like the ones that they use for fly fishing, or sailor's knots, things like that. I think that would be really interesting. That could be a really nice detail. This is a figure 8 knot, which I think is really interesting, and a whole bunch of those strung around the side of the top edge of a pot. That would be a real strong look, I think, because you're getting all those intricate details, which I think could be neat. So that is knots. I'm going to untie this now. Though if I wanted to keep it together, I would add a little bit of, I would score it a little bit and add a little bit of slip in some of the seams, which would help keep it together. But in this instance, I don't want to do that because I want to keep showing you examples. For swirls, super basic as well. We're going to take one end, start with the narrower end, and then we're just going to wrap it on itself by pinching and twirling. This is actually the technique that you use to make pinch pots as well, or sorry, coil pots as well. But in this instance, I'm just going to roll it on itself to create this sort of snail form. And if I wanted this to be permanently joined, I would be once again scoring it along this edge, adding just a little bit of slip, and then pressing it together. It's not super necessary with Sculpey, but if that was just clay, it would be a good idea to do that to make sure that your form is. And then we get this nice little snail shell, coil, cinnamon bun type form, where you see the layers building out, which I think is nice. If we were going to do our last coil element, so we'll take a bunch of clay coils and we'll wrap them sort of one way, and then one under, and then one over, one under, then over, over and under. That one was on top, so that one will be underneath. Then we'll do the same thing on the other side. So if the one coil's on top, the other one's underneath it. A little bit of lifting and lowering. I was going to do this permanently, not for a demonstration. Then I'd be taking a little more time and scoring each one and applying slip. But I don't need to do that for this, because once again, the idea is that you get what's happening here, which is that you can use clay coils to do a variety of shapes and forms. Really sort of any linear element that you might sort of think about, you can use clay coils to do that linear element and get sort of a 3D line, which is neat as someone who likes and appreciates drawing. Another one. This one, last one was on top, so this one will be underneath. Lay that one over. That one will be underneath. This one will be on top. One more, I think. Lighten that guy out a little bit. Top. Underneath. And you can form an entire clay bowl or vessel out of that and essentially make a basket but out of clay, which would be neat. Or you could apply that to the entire side of a slab of clay, and then you're creating little sort of pockets and shadows, details like that. You could make these coils bigger or smaller or flatter. It's really just a way to create textures. Unfortunately, there's a plane going overhead, so hopefully you heard that. So those are 4 coil elements you can make. I think all of them are interesting. I think all of them could be applied even together or on different applications. I think this is a really great way of expanding how you use this sort of foundational technique. Thanks. Bye.